Having been a dad for just around 5 weeks, there was a lot that I didn't know about newborns. And there was a lot that just nobody told me about. Find out what my top 5 things were, and stay tuned for number 5 because that was something I just learned this week. Hey, I'm Sam with Systems of Impact, the place for dads by a new dad if you're looking for career, personal, and tech advice. All right, and to jump right into number 1, it's that babies grunt like they're fighting an MMA fight. If you're trying to sleep during the night, for example, you're gonna have a grunting baby a ton. So something that I ended up doing is I ended up going and jumping on Amazon and I bought a set of earplugs that worked for me. I'm not the biggest fan of earplugs. I got some that are kind of like in the ear, and the left one actually hurt me a little bit. But overall, if you find a set of earplugs that work for you, especially if you're a dad in this case, it's going to help you get at least some quality sleep. Not necessarily potentially long stretches of it because, obvious reasons, but it will help with getting some of that quality sleep back. And that brings me to number 2, and this is your baby's sleep cycles will not make any sense. For newborns, they don't have any kind of circadian rhythm, and so they don't know the difference between night and day. And so when they're sleeping, it's whenever they feel like it. Don't worry about it. This is perfectly okay, especially in those first few weeks. You're not going to want to try to sleep train your newborn. But the key here is that understanding that your baby is just trying to get sleep whenever that is taking place. And a lot of times it will actually be completely flipped. They'll be sleeping most of the day and then wide awake at night. So something to keep in mind as you're going through this. The key solution that I have found so far has been work with your partner. This is going to be huge. When Celeste was brand new and she was just, here a week or two, we ended up taking shifts, and it was very difficult for us initially, but I would take a good chunk of the day and she would take overnight. And this allowed us to acclimate to her sleep patterns initially. And she's gotten better as time has gone on, but it really helped us. But from a relationship standpoint, it definitely had its challenges. And this is where you need to make sure that resentment doesn't rear its head. So when you're talking with your partner and you're, creating this plan around it, make sure that when you're offering something, you're doing it and you're not keeping score. This is crucial in this particular realm. Number 3 is overfeeding is a thing. One thing I did end up hearing quite a bit about is that newborns have this inherent ability to know when they're full. And so they typically won't overfeed. But with Celeste, that wasn't the case. Whether it was breastfed or it was bottle fed, she would overeat. And so this is something that was a little more difficult to gauge because you can see how much the newborn is supposed to drink. And you can see, between X and X amount of ounces in this particular week. And you're like, okay, I got this. I can go ahead and feed her that amount. But sometimes she would go ahead and eat more than that amount. And then you'd end up having the spit up everywhere and you'd have to go clean another shirt. It's common enough that they do overfeed. And I've seen other dads express this exact same thing. Now, the solution to overfeeding is meter what you're feeding them. And again, this is a caveat to this. If you're like with Celeste, she was very, she has reflux and she has colicky tendencies, which is just kind of a blanket term. But from a reflux perspective, she would go ahead and she would eat, but then she would end up spitting up a decent amount. So what we ended up starting to do is we would go ahead and feed an ounce, especially if it was bottle, feed an ounce and then burp her and let it sit for a minute, and then go ahead and feed another ounce, sit her up, burp her, and so on and so forth. What this also allows you to do is measure and meter what they're eating. And so it kind of lets them check in and see, am I full or not? And it allows you to see, are they still crying bloody murder or not? So from a dual perspective, this allows you to do that. Now, a caveat to this, and one thing you need to keep in mind, is they do go through cluster feedings. And this is essentially where they eat more than they normally would because something is taking place. They're having a growth spurt, they're having a leap moment. There's a bunch of different reasons for those cluster feedings to take place. So during these periods, they will eat more. And that's why you may have had it figured out yesterday, but today's a brand new day, so prepare for it. Number 4. As a dad, you're going to feel guilty. Your partner is going to take the brunt of the force, generally speaking. They're going to be the ones that are going to have to man the fort in, again, general terms. They're going to be, you can't breastfeed as a dad. There's a lot of things around feeding that as you as a dad, you're just not able to do. And so you may feel guilty in these realms. There's also the key of, for me, I ended up going back off of paternity leave after 2 weeks. And so Carissa ended up having to essentially man the fort. This comes down to communication, and communication is going to be really, really big as you're going through this process. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to bicker and you're not going to have potential arguments, but communicate, talk with each other, understand where each other's coming from, meet those particular needs. This is going to be a bit of a struggle, but some of the potential solutions here when it comes to feeling guilty is cater to your partner's love language. And that love language with Carissa is quality time, which is in short supply. So when we have it, we go ahead and take it. And then acts of service. And so whenever there's something that she needs done or something I can do for her, then I go ahead and take care of that for her. So communicate, do that love language that matters to her, and help as much as you can. You're still going to feel guilty at times. There's things that you're just not going to be able to help with, but do as much as you can to make sure that they feel supported and that they know that you're there. And that brings me to number 5. Number 5 is purple crying, and it's something I just learned this week. It's essentially a phase that all babies go through that nothing seems to soothe them and they just keep on crying. A lot of times this potentially can be lumped in under colic, and colic is kind of like a blanket term. And as long as they meet 3 core criteria for colic as far as a diagnosis is concerned, then they go ahead and say, oh yeah, that baby has colic. But with Celeste, she sometimes has gas, sometimes has reflux, sometimes she just has to go to the bathroom. And sometimes she is inconsolable, but it's not for like gigantic hours of time. But purple crying is essentially where they go through that phase of crying where nothing you do helps. Now, this is very, very baby specific because some babies go through this phase and they hardly cry at all. And then you have the complete other side of the spectrum where you have babies that cry for 15, 18 hours a day. And that can be extremely taxing on a parent. So from a purple crying perspective, understand that this particular form of crying is not something that is pain related. It's not uncomfortable related. It's them crying. They're crying to cry. And it's ways of them developing in that particular phase. Celeste is starting to go through it a little bit. She has periods where she just cries. And sometimes it's just, you have to endure it. And I end up having no earplugs, not nose plugs. That'd be kind of weird. Sometimes she stings, but babies. But she's starting to go through it. But she's also doing it at the same time she's starting to go through a leap moment. So she's kind of getting a twofer on that. So kind of a bummer for her on that. But the solution for purple crying is there's actually no solution. You just have to endure it. You can go through the checklist of things that potentially can be wrong. Like, is her diaper wet? Does she have gas? Does she have to go to the bathroom? Does she have reflux? All these different things, you just go down that checklist, and once you've exhausted that checklist and find out there's nothing left, then it's a purple crying moment and you just have to roll with it. If you're finding value in today's content, make sure to hit that like button. And because you've made it this far, I'm gonna go ahead and give you a bonus tip. In this bonus tip, I've kind of touched on it a little bit as we've gone through this video, but the core tenet here is that find time to reconnect with your partner. Having a newborn is stressful. Going through those crying moments are going to drive you insane. It is difficult. It's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. And because of that, you're both going through stressors and you're potentially going to clash as a result. So this bonus tip is find time to reconnect with your partner. Understand what their love language is, and then cater to that love language. As I mentioned, Chris is very big on quality time and acts of service. And so for me, I go ahead and I try to cater to those areas as much as possible. So in the mornings before Celeste wakes up, we have some quality time together and we just relax. Sometimes in the evening, sometimes during the day, just getting those little pockets of time together to reconnect and understand, to be with each other, to be together, to show each other that love, and to continue putting in that work in the relationship is crucial to making sure that things come as you're coming out of this, newborn phase, that you're coming out of it stronger, not showing all the different cracks that are starting to become chasms. Now, I want to hear from you dads out there. What were some things from a newborn perspective that completely surprised you? Go ahead and put those in the comments below. And coming up, you're going to find more videos on becoming a dad and the journey that I'm going through. Also some tech videos, so make sure to stay tuned for those. I got a new computer that's going to be coming, and they're going to kind of geeking out in the tech world. So stay tuned for those videos, and if you have questions, make sure to put those in the comments below, and I'll see you in those other videos.